we were talking about the substitution of the Levium. That was in when I use the Aryeh Kaplan one, it doesn't say the chapter numbers at the top. You have to find it. Chapter 3, verse 44. Chapter 3, verse 44.
Okay.
So, and we said, God spoke to Moshe saying, take the Levites in place of all the male firstborn Israelites. Also take the Levites' livestock in place of the Israelites' firstborn livestock. The Levites shall thus become mine. I am God. So the actual term is Vahayu li halavim. The Levites will be mine. So says God. Also take a redemption for the 273 individuals by which the firstborn outnumber the Levites. This shall be 5 shekels for each individual, according to sanctuary standard, where the shekel is 20 gerahs. Give the silver to Aaron and his sons as a redemption for the firstborn who are in excess of the Levites. So the Kohen is the one who is going to take the redemption for the firstborns. Moshe took the redemption money for those who were left over after the majority of firstborn had been redeemed by the Levites. The silver that he took from the firstborn Israel consisted of 1365 sanctuary shekels. Moshe gave the silver for those who were redeemed to Aaron and his sons as God commanded. It was done as God had commanded Moses. So that is one of the places where we see the redemption of the firstborn, but also God saying that he's taking the Levites in place of the firstborn. We also saw it, I think it was chapter 8. It was in chapter 8 as well. Yeah, in chapter 8, verse 5, God spoke to Moshe saying, take the Levites from among the Israelites and purify them. In order to purify them, you have to sprinkle water of the sin offering on them, which I think it means the ashes of the red heifer. Pretty sure. Water for purification, means ashes, whatever. They shall shave their entire bodies. They shall immerse their bodies and their clothing. In other words, go to the mikvah, and they'll be clean. Then there's a offering that is brought, and present the Levites before God, and have the Israelites lay their hands upon the Levites. Aaron shall then designate the Levites as a wave offering to God. This is an unusual thing. It's possible that he had to actually lift each Levite and wave him. And the Levites shall become the ones for God. Yeah. The Levites shall then lay their hands on the heads of the bulls, and you shall prepare the bulls as an offering. In this manner, you shall separate the Levites from the other Israelites, and Levites shall become mine. Again, it says they shall become mine. And they, after you've purified them and designated them as a wave offering, the Levites shall come to perform the service in the communion tent. They are given to me from among the Israelites in place of the firstborn of all the Israelites. I've taken them for myself. This is because all firstborn of the Israelites are mine, man and beast alike. I sanctified them for myself on the day that I killed all the firstborn in Egypt. I've now taken the Levites in place of all the firstborn Israelites, and I've given the Levites as a gift from the Israelites to Aaron and his descendants. Okay, see, the Levites are like a gift to Aaron and his descendants. So Aaron and his descendants are the people who are going to do the primary service, and the Levites are going to be what appears to be a class that serves the Kohanim. They serve the Kohanim. They shall henceforth perform the service for the Israelites in the communion tent and atone for the Israelites. The Israelites will then not be subject to divine wrath when they approach the sanctuary. Moshe and Aaron and the entire community did for the Levites all that God had instructed Moshe regarding the Levites. The Israelites did it for them exactly. The Levites purified themselves through a sin offering. They immersed their bodies in their clothing. Aaron designated them as a wave offering before God and made atonement for them to purify them. After that, the Levites came to perform the communion tent service under the direction of Aaron and his sons. It was all done exactly as God had commanded Moshe regarding the Levites. Okay, and then it's going to go on and talk a little bit more how long they serve. All right, so these are two places which say that God originally dedicated, he originally took the firstborn. He said, all first families are mine. Man, I sanctified them for myself on the day that I killed all the firstborn in Egypt. So on that day that he killed the firstborn in Egypt, he sanctified the firstborn, and he uses the word, they are mine. And then he uses the word that the Levites are mine. And so we have that word sanctified and mine. Okay, so especially in chapter 8, I just have this small point that is annoying me. There's a small point that's annoying me. And especially that chapter 8 that we read in Baalotcha, where it used the words, he gave the Levites to Aaron and his descendants, right? In other words, who the ones who are replacing the firstborn are the Levites, not the Kohanim.
Right.
Because he says there's like the Levites and there's Aaron and his sons. So you have Aaron and his sons. Now, there may be an earlier verse that Aaron himself might be identified as a Levite. Aaron himself may be identified as Levite in some other part of the Torah, okay? And he is from the tribe of Levi. But here in this text, it seems clear that Aaron is a Kohen not because it does not seem he's a Kohen because he's a Levite, right? It seems he's a Kohen because God picked him to be the Kohen. And who are the rest of the Kohanim? His descendants.
Right.
Is he a Kohen because the firstborn were switched for the Levites? It does not seem like that. It seems like he is a Kohen.
He's being designated.
He is already a Kohen. He's separate. And then there are the Levites who are replacing the firstborn. And they are going to be given to Aaron. Aaron is a separate thing. Kohanim, okay, so we, in some regards, you could say this. The Kohanim, the priests, are a subset of the tribe of Levi. In some regards they are, because Aaron himself is a descendant from the tribe of Levi. So Aaron could be said to be a Levi, or he could be said to be a Kohen. Sometimes you could look at him as a Levi, sometimes you could look at him as a Kohen. Moshe is a Levi. Moshe is from the tribe of Levi. But Moshe is not a Levi. In other words, he doesn't have his role or special position because of some switch that happened with the firstborn. Moshe had his role before, and it looks like Aaron has his role before. Aaron is not a Kohen because he's a Levi. Aaron is a Kohen because he was picked to be a Kohen. This is what I'm suggesting. And there's text here to suggest this. Why do I say that? Why do I care? Because the question is this. We have a custom, and it could be that you guys are not as familiar with this custom as I am, because I am a firstborn. Okay, so as a firstborn, there is a custom that on Erev Pesach, on the 14th of Nisan, this is one of those, I have to always clarify, Orthodox Jews, when Orthodox Jews use the term Erev Pesach, they mean the day before. When conservative Jews use the word Erev Pesach, they mean the night of Pesach. The Gemara sometimes uses it one way, sometimes uses it another way. But when we say the word Erev Pesach in this context, we mean the day before Pesach starts.
Right.
Having
Before
said
Sunday.
Right. Having said that, it's particularly confusing when it comes to the holiday of Pesach, because the holiday of Pesach has an element, a celebratory element on that day, which we call Erev Pesach. In fact, you could say that it is really Pesach because that's the day you sacrifice the Pesach offering. The actual slaughtering of the Pesach offering happens during the day. It's eaten at night.
Right.
But the actual,
That's because you can't kill it.
well, you could. I mean, on Shabbos, we have offerings. We have offerings on Shabbos. If God wanted us to do it on Pesach, he would have said to do it on Pesach. We have offerings on Pesach. But the Korban Pesach is celebrated, is sacrificed on Erev Pesach, most likely so that you'll have the meat at the Seder night. You want to eat the meat at the Seder night. The meat of the Korban Pesach is, you could say, one of the pillars of the event. We don't have it now because we don't have sacrifices now. But in the time when there was a Beis Hamikdash, the eating of the meat from the Korban Pesach was one of the important pillars of the experience, one of the most important aspects of the experience of the Seder night. So in order to have that, you would have to do it during the day. But whatever the pragmatic, maybe there's pragmatic, maybe it's deeper than that. But the Korban Pesach is brought during the day. And when a Korban is brought, that is the pomp and circumstance of the pilgrimage festival. There's going to be stuff happening all throughout the pilgrimage festival, all throughout Pesach. But the real highlight is going to be that day when everybody's bringing when at least a representative of the family is going to bring the animal. This is when all Kohanim are on duty. There are lines, there's thousands of people standing with small goats or lambs, waiting for them to be slaughtered, for the blood to be sprinkled on the altar, for them to be able to then take the meat back to where their family is. The Levites are singing. Hallel is being sung during that time. There are descriptions of tourists, Gentile tourists, that came from all over to watch this spectacle. Exactly how they saw it, I don't know. There must have been viewing points on hills nearby, or I don't know, some kind of stands that would allow them to see over the walls of the Beis Hamikdash. But the people were coming to see this. This was really, if you're asking yourself, what day, if you had a choice of viewing the Beis Hamikdash in its glory, there are two main days. There's that day and there's Yom Kippur. Those are your two main days to see the Beis Hamikdash in all its glory. The other pilgrimage festivals would have been fantastic. Somebody might say during Sukkot, the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, when they're dancing and singing, that might be a highlight day to be there. But this is certainly one of them. And that's happening on Erev Pesach. So, but there is a custom that we have. And that custom is that the firstborn fast on Erev Pesach. The firstborn fast on Erev Pesach. So let's say you wanted to see this in action. So you would come to Shul on the morning before Pesach, before the morning of the Seder, that morning, before the Seder happens.
Right.
And then after davening, this is what you would see. After davening, somebody starts to read from the end of a tractate of Gemara. And then there are these special sort of prayers that are said, and a Kaddish is said, and then everybody says Mazel Tov, and people go in the back and they eat a little something, and that's it. No, you will not see typically firstborns fasting. You will not see them fasting. But it's called the fast of the firstborn. So as a firstborn, one of my considerations is finding a place that's going to have a siyum. So if we're traveling, like there were times when we traveled in the car to go to Denver, let's say, for to be with my grandparents for Pesach, I wasn't going to be near a shul that had a siyum. So what was I supposed to do? So we had to figure it out. I had to figure out to finish something. And there's times when we were in yeshiva where one of us had to finish a masechta just so that there would be a siyum for it. This is, part of the consideration.
Or you could fast.
Right. No, but that's the strange thing about this custom. Nobody fasts. It's called the fast of the firstborn, but nobody
you have
fasts.
To find a reason not to fast.
Right. So if you're looking at this, you would be surprised that anybody would even call this the fast of the firstborn, because there are fasters. Now, the truth is, that's not true. There are some people that fasted. My teacher, Moshe Shapiro, used to fast on Erev Pesach. The Gemara mentions that there were figures, maybe it was Rav Sheshes, I forgot who. The Gemara mentions, the Bavli mentions, I think Rav Sheshes possibly, somebody that fasted, and they're trying to figure out why did he fast. The Rishalmi also has this. And they're trying to figure out why they fasted. So one answer was that the person was an istinus, they call him, which is that he was finicky, and he wanted to make sure that he was hungry for the Seder. He was concerned that he would be too full, and so he would always fast on Erev Pesach beforehand. The first overt mention of the custom to fast as a firstborn is mentioned in what's called one of the small tractates of the Talmud. It's called Maseches Sofrim. These tractates are not officially part of Shas, of what we call Shas, or they're not officially part of the Talmud Bavli or Yerushalmi, but they are sort of in the galaxy of them. They're mostly right. They don't have Gemara on them. They just have what's called Braita. They don't have Mishnah. They have Braita and they don't have Gemara on them, but they are in that galaxy. I don't know exactly when they were written, but it seems like they were written in the time of the Talmud, somewhere around there. So there's one of those tractates, which is called Masechet Sofrim, says that there's a custom for firstborns to fast on Erev Pesach. And apparently that's what they would do. You would actually fast. Up until modern times, that is most likely, oh, Linda's trying to get in. It's all right. Sorry, Linda, sometimes it doesn't tell me you're waiting. I don't know why, but I'm glad you're there.
Text message to me, my phone is turned off.
I know.
Okay.
I'm texting Liz. I'm calling you. I'm
Sorry. It didn't. For some reason it didn't say you were waiting.
Where are you, please? Tell
so
me chapter, verse.
We're in chapter 3
Of
of
the book again.
Numbers.
Okay.
Numbers chapter 3, and we were just talking about the verses 44 through 51. And we're talking about the fact that the Levites are replacing the firstborn, and we read also from chapter 8 in chapter 8, and that in chapter 8 there was a point where it made it clear, I believe, that the Levites are the ones that were replacing the firstborn, not
It's
Kohanim.
after, Linda, hi. It's actually verse 8 in the same chapter, not chapter 8.
No, it's chapter 8.
Oh, it is?
In
I thought
12.
it's 3:8.
No, it's chapter 8, and it's, one second. Chapter 8. It's chapter 8, and it starts in verse 5 of chapter 8. And then the actual verse I'm interested in is chapter 8, verse 19. So in chapter 8, verse 19, it says, "And I have given the Levites as a gift from the Israelites to Aaron and his descendants." So that's chapter 8, verse 19. I don't think we
Sorry.
have, that's okay. I don't think we have a line like that here. But to me, that really highlights that it's the Levites that are the replacement for the firstborn, but not the Kohanim, The Levites, but not the Kohanim. The Kohanim are Kohanim because Aaron was chosen as the first Kohen, and his descendants are going to be the Kohanim after him. And that seems to be something different. But the Levites as a whole, even though Aaron himself technically is a Levite, but the Levites as a whole are then going to be given to Aaron and his sons as a kind of service class to Aaron and his sons, to the Kohanim. That's what it seems to be in chapter 8, verse 19. So I was mentioning that on Erev Pesach, we have a custom which we call the fast of the firstborn. And so the way that worked was, again, it's first mentioned overtly. It might be hinted to even earlier, in the Talmud Bavli and in the Jerusalem Talmud. But in the tractate, Masechet Sofrim, it says it overtly that there's a custom that the firstborn fast on the day before Pesach, on Erev Pesach. And that seems to have been the way it was. It was an actual fast day. And then at some point, the custom became to replace that fast with a siyum, with the finishing of a tractate, the celebration. It seems to be a modern switch that happened. Or in the 1800s, the Noda Yehuda, Rabbi Yechezkel Landau of Prague, famously had a sign in his synagogue: "Nobody can do a siyum here on Erev Pesach." In other words, he did not agree with this practice. He was against it, right? And even as late as like the early 1900s, the Aruch HaShulchan, who was Rabbi Epstein, he notes the fact that it's become very commonplace to do a siyum instead of fasting with surprise. So it seems to be a relatively modern phenomena, the replacing of it. It seems to be that up until modern times, firstborns actually fasted on that day. So let's just treat that, not the way we do it now. Now the notion is that some kind of a celebratory event somehow overrides the fast. Let's just deal with the fast itself. And there are several questions that people ask about the fast itself. First of all, why would you have a fast on Erev Pesach? You never have that. You never have it. It's very rare that you would have a fast right before holiday. We have it before Purim. We do have it before Purim, right? We have it before Purim, but other than that, and by the way, on Purim, let's say Purim comes out on Shabbos. So when do they do the fast? They push it off to the Thursday before. They don't do it on Friday. Why don't they do it on Friday? Because on Friday you have to get ready for Shabbos. Okay. So why are you doing the fast on the 14th? So
Then you have to get ready for Pesach.
right. So that's why
You're
it's
right. It
people
makes
are
no sense.
right. People are switching the see. That's why most likely people are doing the siyum instead of the fast, because they have to prepare for Pesach.
Right.
How are you preparing for Pesach? Also, I mean, it started as a custom. This is not law. This was not a law. One of the distinctions between law and custom is that the law was legislation that was passed by the Sanhedrin. Law is purposeful before the. So, for instance, let's say the law that you're not supposed to eat milk and fowl. Milk. So you can't have like a chicken and cheese sandwich, or a chicken au gratin.
Or chicken Kiev.
Chicken or something like that. Why can't you do that? That was rabbinic legislation. Okay, which meant that somebody had to bring this idea up in the Sanhedrin and they had to pass it as a law. A custom is different. A custom evolves organically. It may be that the first writing we have about this custom comes hundreds of years after it started, where people are saying, why are we doing this? And then they're looking back and trying to come to some kind of understanding for the phenomenon. So like kitniot, why do we have kitniot? So you start to see people writing about kitniot at a certain point, and they're starting to come up with their theories about why kitniot started. But it's a theory because they're writing it hundreds of years after it started. That's how customs are. Customs evolve organically, and then when people are writing about the custom, they're often writing hundreds of years later, trying to understand the motivation for it, why it became something that the Jewish people do. This is like that. This is a custom that happened. It did not happen because of legislation. And so now when people are trying to figure out what was the reason for it, these are theories being proposed way after the custom began. So there's different theories, so there are those who suggest that the reason that the firstborn are fasting has to do with the event of the night, it would have been that night, the night of the 15th, the night of the 15th, when the firstborn of the Egyptians were killed. Because it says here, right, that they were chosen, the firstborn were made holy, sanctified, and God says they became mine, right? He sanctified them and they became mine. Something to do with the slaughter of the firstborn. And there's different theories proposed. There's different theories. Why? What happened? What did God do and why did he do it? What did God do and why did he do it? One theory proposed is by something that's found in a work called it's called Orchos Chaim or something. Orchos Chaim. So he suggests, based on other sources, here I'm going to read it. Let's see here. He suggests that the reason the firstborns were specifically targeted by Makas Bechoros is because they were priests for Avodah Zarah. That the notion that firstborns would be the ones who serve God is because that was typically what happened even before that. Even not just Jews in Egypt who tended to be the priests. There are people identified as priests. Even in the Joseph story, there are people identified as priests. So this is a theory. This is a theory that that the firstborn are specifically targeted by the plague in the first place because they tended to be the priests to idolatry. Okay.
Even the animals of the firstborn.
Well, no. This only works. None of these explanations answer everything. None of these explanations every explanation you see here. And by the way, this is typical for explanations after the fact. They never answer every detail. They're never able to. So this is anyways his theory. So his theory is that because Jews, the Torah might hint to this, the Midrash certainly amplifies it. There were Jews who were involved in idolatry. So the Jewish firstborns would have been equally subject to this plague if the reason for the plague, the underlying reason for the plague is to strike at people who would have been the priests to idolatry. So the destroyer would have destroyed the firstborn of the Jews too. In order to save the firstborn of the Jew, God makes them his priests. So in other words, he sort of co-opts them. And he co-opts them. So since the firstborn if this is the story, again, this is accepting a lot of ifs, but if this is the story, so then the firstborn are fasting because really the firstborn should have been killed that night, and they're only killed by the grace of God, as it were, and therefore to sort of try to repent for the state of the firstborn that made us subject to this in the first place. So that's why the firstborn are fasting. Really, the firstborn should have fasted on the 15th, but you can't fast on the 15th. So therefore you fast before, right? That is an explanation. There's another explanation that sort of goes together with that. That is that the firstborn are fasting. So the question there is, though, if you already can't fast on the right day, why make it the day before when the day before is a preparation day? Make it 2 days before, just like we do with the fast of Esther. Why you don't make it on Friday, you make it on Thursday. So in other words, if once you're pushing it off, push it 2 days off. So you would have done the same thing here. And there's lots of other questions, like Lois's question, that it doesn't look like this was just about the firstborn, males. Maybe it looks like of humans, it looks like it's animals. Maybe somebody would say, well, they would offer firstborn animals, so we have to do that too. But I don't know. So, but anyways, so that is a explanation. Another explanation that's given about this is mentioned, where do I see this? It's mentioned in the Torah. Let's say it. I don't know where that tour is, but there's a Chassam Sofer, Rabbi Yechezkel Sofer, who suggests that it's similar to Tainus Esther. Why do we have Tainus Esther, the fast of Esther? There are many people who make the mistake and think that the fast of Esther is because Tainus Esther is because Esther herself fasted. But the commentaries all say that's not that. Esther fasted in the month of Nisan, that's our tradition. There are people who fast that fast after Pesach, 3 days after Pesach, but that's not it. The reason they're fasting is because it's before the war and they want to have merit before the war. That's the way it's understood. So it says here, the same way that on Tanis Esther, the Jews fasted as a merit that they wouldn't be killed in battle, so too the firstborns fast on Erev Pesach as that they shouldn't be killed for their sins. So this is a sort of commemoration of the fact that the firstborns would have fasted just because, even though there's a promise they'll be saved, they want to be worthy or merit that they'll be saved. And so that's why the firstborn are fasting on the day before.
But then everybody should fast, just like on Esther. I mean, I think.
Right. So then, yeah. So that is one of the questions then. Whatever answer is given for this fast, whatever answer is given for it, there's always some issues for it. But that is, by the way, you're right. That is one of the weird things about this fast. One of the weird things is we don't have something like this where only a part of the people fast. And it's a custom that only part of the people fast, only firstborns fast. Why doesn't everybody fast? Another weird thing about it is I'm not a descendant of those firstborns. I'm not a descendant of those firstborns. I happen to be a firstborn. I'm not the descendant of those firstborns. If somebody's doing tshuva, repentance, for something that happened over there, maybe it should be their descendants. Well, why am I? Just because I happen to be a firstborn, repenting for something that other firstborns did. They're not my ancestors. And if they are, they're everybody's ancestors, like Lois was saying. It's all weird things. So Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who just passed away, like 30 years ago, of blessed memory, he suggested something different. He suggested, and this is the one that really annoys me. He suggested that the reason firstborns are fasting is because this is the day when the Beis HaMikdash is in full glory. And all these Kohanim and Levim are in service. And the firstborn is left out. I could have been the working in the Beit HaMikdash, but I'm not. Why am I not? Because at the time of the golden calf, the firstborns did not answer the call. Mi la Hashem Elai, who is to God with me? The firstborns did not answer that call. The tribe of Levi did. Moshe called out, Mi la Hashem Elai, who are to God with me? The Levim answered that call. The Kohanim did not. The firstborns did not answer that call, and therefore the firstborn. And so when I'm seeing that, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, here's his language. Reb Shlomo Zalman points out that the claiming of the reasons for Tanis Bechorim is to remember that the firstborns were saved. Blah, blah, blah. The reason we commemorate it on the 14th is, he has all sorts of questions. He therefore suggests that the reason for Tanis Bechorim is actually because when the Bechorim come along with the rest of Israel to bring their Korban Pesach on Erev Pesach, they're going to be incredibly pained, depressed, and embarrassed about the fact that they lost their opportunity to be the ones performing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, instead had to merely watch as the Kohanim do the avodah in their place. This was especially difficult for them because the Korban Pesach that they were bringing actually celebrates the very moment that they became sanctified. Because of the Bechorim's incredibly pain and sadness, they don't eat and drink at all that day, and it was instituted as a day of mourning for all those, because it's like we lost out on something. We lost out on an opportunity. He points out, this person who I'm quoting from points out, the reasons of Shlomo Zalman or of Ehrenreich do not explain why firstborn Kohanim and Levim fast. They're still doing, because they also fast. Why are they fasting if they're the ones who are doing the service in the Beis HaMikdash? Right. The reason that this one annoys me, and plus there's a teaching in the in the the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim, this is a famous story that the Chafetz Chaim told Rabbi Shimon Schwab. Rabbi Shimon Schwab was a student, and he happened to spend Shabbos with the Chafetz Chaim, and so he told a story. And the story was that that the Chafetz Chaim says, when Mashiach comes, I'm going to be running off to the Beis Hamikdash. You know why I'm running off to the Beis Hamikdash? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu called out, "Who is to God unto me?" my ancestors answered that call, and your ancestors did not, because he wasn't a Kohen. So the problem I have with these stories is that, and the way, I mean, I added that you still see Levim doing the work in the Beis Hamikdash, but the primary work that's being done in the Beis Hamikdash is being done by the Kohanim. And the Chafetz Chaim story is about the Kohanim. It implies that the firstborns could have been Kohanim. And it does not seem that way from our text. From our text, the firstborn were not going to be the Kohanim. Any of these explanations that have to do with the firstborn being priests or Kohanim, it doesn't seem that way from the Chumash. From the Chumash, it seems that the firstborn were always going to be the Levites. The Levites do not bring the offerings. The Levites are not involved in the offerings at all. The Levites cannot go into the building of the sanctuary. Only Kohanim can go in. If there's somebody, in other words, if I could have been a Kohen, that when I was doing everything like that, I could see a kind of jealousy that I could have been doing what the Kohanim are doing. What the Levim are doing, would I be jealous of what the Levim are doing? I don't think so. Also, by the way, a regular Yisrael is allowed to actually do the shechita. You're allowed to actually do the slaughtering. You can't do the rest of it, but you can do the slaughtering. So if I'm the person who's bringing the goat or the lamb, and I'm in line and I'm waiting, and now it's my turn, there's a row of Kohanim in front of me. There's no Levim there. The Levim are singing, or the Levim are guarding by the guard posts. Okay, I'm not saying they don't look important, but they're singing and they're the guards at the gates. That's what they're doing. In front of me is a row of Kohanim. I actually slaughter the animal. Then a Kohen puts the bowl there, gathers the blood, and then the animal is taken by the Kohanim and they skin it and prepare it and put it on a spit, and then I take the thing back. Everything that's done in front of me is done by the Kohanim. The statement of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and the statement of the Chafetz Chaim, and it's sort of something that when you hear people talking about the switch that happened, what the Kohanim lose, you often hear it talked about being priests. Even here in that explanation of the Orchos Chaim, he says it's because the firstborn. Why were the firstborn being killed? Because they tended to be the priests to the idolatry. So these would have been priests. So God takes them to be priests, but he doesn't take them to be priests. Aaron is not a Kohen because it got switched from the firstborn. Aaron is chosen of himself, and the Kohanim are descendants of Aaron. The ones who are being switched, for the Bechor, are the Levim, are the Levites, and they are a different set,
Right.
than the Kohanim. So I know it's a nitpicky thing. It's a nitpicky thing, but it comes up like, and also it's just important for me as I'm thinking about it, because it does this, even this experience of thinking about it now, it does help me focus on my role as a firstborn. There, by the way, there is one time that a firstborn can be called into service, and that is when Kohanim are getting ready to do the priestly blessing Ashkenazim do the priestly blessing on holidays outside of Israel. Sephardim, many Sephardim do the priestly blessing every day, even outside of Israel. And in Israel, Ashkenazim and Sephardim do it every day. But so if you're a Levi, your job is to wash the hands of the Kohen of the Kohanim before they go up to do a Birkas Kohanim. If there are no Levim, then the firstborn goes and does it. So there's one point where the firstborn gets called into duty. But again, the firstborn gets called into duty to replace the Levi, not to replace the Kohanim. There's no rule that if there are no Kohanim, the firstborn gives the Birkas Kohanim. There's no rule like that. But there is a rule that if there's no Levi, the firstborn can go up and wash the hands of the Kohen. The firstborn were supposed to be the Levim. Now, and that was what I read to you from last time from the Rambam. I'm going to read it again from the Rambam in the laws of Shemitah and Yovel. So again, this is the Rambam in his codes. In Sefaria, it's in the Halacha section, in the Mishnah Torah. And then it's a whole list of all the different sections. And this is the end of the agricultural laws. It's the laws of Shemitah and Yovel. And it's in the last chapter. And so he says in chapter 13, he started off by saying, although the tribe of Levi does not have an ancestral portion within Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people were commanded to give them cities to dwell in and additional residential property. So they had, they didn't have like a landed estate, but they would tend to live in cities. The cities included the 6 cities of refuge, 42 additional cities. When cities of refuge would be added in the era of Mashiach, all will be given to the Levites. The obligation to give the non-developed land around the cities is explicitly mentioned in the Torah as being a radius of whatever. He goes into that detail. All right, so they get land. And then it says, the entire tribe of Levi are commanded against receiving an inheritance in the land of Canaan. They were commanded against receiving a share in the spoil when the cities were conquered. The priests and the Levites, the entire tribe of Levi, should not have a portion and an inheritance among Israel. A portion refers to a portion of the spoil, and inheritance refers to a portion of the land. This is in Numbers 18. You shall not receive a heritage in their land, nor will you have a portion among them. If a Levite or a priest takes a portion of the spoil, he's punished. And then the Rambam says there are exceptions to that. Why did the Levites not receive a portion in the inheritance of Israel and the spoils of war like their brethren? Because they were set aside to serve God and minister unto him and to instruct people at large in his just paths and righteous judgments. So the Rambam identifies 2 things which seem to be what this is how he understands what God means. When God said, I'm sanctified them and they are mine, what did he mean? What he means is the Levites were intended to focus on serving him, which might mean to minister him, and that which might mean, working in the Beit HaMikdash. And also, to instruct people at large in his just paths and his righteous judgments. So teachers, right? And also to be members of the Sanhedrin. The Rambam even says that you should try, if you can, to choose Kohanim and Levim to be members of the Sanhedrin. That's the best option, because that is part of their design to instruct Israel. I guess part of that, there's a subsection of that, is to be members of the Sanhedrin, because the Torah itself says the Kohanim and the Levim, you shall go to the Kohanim and the Levim, and they're talking about the Sanhedrin, right? They will teach your judgments to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. Therefore, they were set apart from the ways of the world. They do not wage war like the remainder of the Jewish people, nor do they reserve an inheritance, nor do they acquire for themselves through their physical power. Instead, they are God's legion. As it states, God has blessed his legion, and he provides for them, as it states, I am your portion and your inheritance. So that seems to be how the Rambam understands what it means when God says that I have sanctified them and they are mine, that they are meant to minister to him and to devote themselves to the teaching of his Torah. That's what he seems to understand that when it says here that that's it. And then he goes on to say, not only the tribe of Levi, but any one of the inhabitants of the world whose spirit generously motivates him, and he understands with his wisdom to set himself aside and stand before God to serve him and minister him and to know God. So these are all part of what it means to be devoted to God in the sense that he's talking about when he says holy. So it says his spirit generously motivates him. He understands with his wisdom to set himself aside. That's kadosh, to set himself aside and stand before God to serve him and minister him and to know God, proceeding justly as God made him, removing from his neck the yoke of the many reckonings that people seek. So this person is removing himself from what we would consider the rat race, removing himself from the workaday world. Right. And there is permission. He makes it sound like this is not just for Jews. He said, any of the inhabitants of the world who want to set themselves aside and devote themselves exclusively to this kind of service of God, because work also is serving God, clearly. But this is talking about this, completely dedicate their life to serving of God, to serve him and minister him and to know God, proceedingly justly as God made him, removing from his neck the yoke of the many reckonings people seek. He is sanctified as holy of holies. So this person is kadosh, not just kadosh, kodesh kadoshim. God will be his portion and heritage forever, and he will provide what is sufficient for him in this world, like he provides for the priests and the Levites. And thus David declared, God is the lot of my portion, you are my cup, you support my lot. So I saw there's this Rabbi Anthony Manning, Rabbi Avram Manning, who suggested that this is why we do a siyum. Why do you do a siyum? So imagine that it's like Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, or like some of the other commentators. Yeah, so in other words, how are you sort of comforting the firstborn? How is the firstborn being comforted? So the way they're being comforted is they learn Torah, they celebrate the learning of Torah, because the learning of Torah, he wanted to suggest that not exactly this. He wanted to suggest that there are three crowns. In Pirkei Avot, it says there are three crowns. There's a crown of kingship. You could be a king. There's a crown of priesthood. You could be a priest. But then there's the Keser Torah. There's the crown of Torah. So even if you could, again, you have to not be annoyed by the priesthood reference, but even if the firstborn loses the crown of priesthood, but Keser Torah is always available. The crown of Torah is always available. That you are not less in the eyes of God necessarily, because you could have once been the ministering servant of God officially. You still have that access. The crown of Torah is always available, and that's also a crown. That's what he wanted to say. I'm suggesting, based on the Rambam over here, that you could actually get back what you lost. That according to the Rambam, that the part of the comfort here is there is a path if you so desire. And that may be part of what, the Rambam's thing. If you so desire. No, let's say you're lamenting the fact that you are in a circumstance that you were a firstborn, and it used to be for a brief period of time, and it would have been very brief, for a brief period of time, the time between leaving Egypt and the golden calf, which is 7 weeks, a very brief time. For 7 weeks, the firstborn had the potential to be like a Levi. For 7 weeks. And then they lost it. But you can get it back. You and anybody else who's looking at this can get it back. Because it's not just, that's what the Rambam's saying, it's not just the tribe of Levi that has this, but if you would dedicate yourself to ministering to God like a Levite, you also, God will accept it. You will be Holy of Holies, and God will treat you like it. He'll take care of you like he takes care of the Levite. So anyways, that was
okay.
I know it's annoying. It's annoying
well, I
too.
just think
There's all little things. I'm annoyed too. All right, go ahead.
the Rambam kind of mixes up things. One is a choice, and one you have no choice at all if you're a Levite. And it seems like the Levites are the ones who cannot be redeemed. Every other firstborn can be redeemed. The Levites have no chance of being redeemed. They are in their circumstance and they have to stay there, right?
You're making it sound like the circumstance is a crummy circumstance.
I think it is. I think it is. I'm sorry.
This
I'm
is
sorry.
not.
It's a one.
This
I
is
always
thinking the
thought-
opposite of you.
I know. I always thought that there was a two-edged sword here. If you have someone who's dedicated, that's a wonderful honor. That's beautiful. You are sanctified to God. On the other hand, if God says, which always, I didn't understand this, take care of the widow, the orphan, and the Levite in your gates. I always thought there was something a little bit, just not so great about being a Levite, because you don't earn your own keep. You don't have the ability to do that.
You know what I think has happened to you, Lois? You've been watching too much of The Crown. I think I feel like this is one of the important, strong messages of The Crown, that we all aspire to be kings and queens, but the people who are actually forced into it have a different attitude about the experience, and they sort of wish they hadn't been
Well, look at Meghan and Harry.
Yes, Harry and Meghan living it out. So this
No
is
sympathy there.
I think that they all are very sympathetic to Lois's attitude about the Levim and the Kohanim. I am, and I will take note of that, Lois, as I think about this. But from the rosy perspective, let's just say that, if there's a rosy perspective,
Yes.
and I think to myself, as a firstborn, I could have been like the sons of Edward, the abdicated King of England, his children. We could have been royals.
He regretted
Why
it.
did he have to do that?
He
So
regretted it.
I, as a firstborn, might stand there looking or imagining, as I imagine the service, and think to myself, had it not been for other firstborns at the time, I too could have been there as part of the service, the ministering servant. I am told by the Rambam, worry not, young man. If you should choose, you too can choose to devote yourself to this.
Well, that's. I think of the three explanations you get. There's a little bit of a hint about them being the priesthood, because before this happens, Hashem says to Moses, I'm going to kill the firstborn. It's already a setup for him to get the firstborn. So I see that as a little bit of a hint that maybe that was why, but.
You're saying that even before Aaron is chosen, you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. I have a question. Is there really only 273 firstborns of all the tribes of Israel, more than the firstborns of the Levites?
Not more than the firstborn, more than the number of Levites. The entire number of Levites amounts to the same number as the firstborn of the other tribes.
Okay. That's
So
why it's
that
270.
makes- It's almost makes sense because the Levites are 1/12 of the tribes. And so if you're having a firstborn male, well, no, there should be a lot more firstborn males
Yeah.
than there are the number of Levites. You're right. There should be a lot more firstborn males, but there aren't for some reason. That's a question. Why aren't there more? That was something that got brought up here, it got brought up here. Why aren't there more firstborns than they mentioned? Somebody asked.
Thank you, Rabbi. I have to
All
go
right,
now.
guys, be well. Have a great day.
There are
Thank you.
first- they
Shabbat
just-
All right, I look
Shalom,
forward to
everybody.
meeting with you next week.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry,
Call
Linda.
me when I
I'm
get in
sorry.
the car.
All right.
It's
But you're
coming.
I
muted. Yeah.
can't be there next week. Sorry, I have
Okay.
something I have to go to.
All right. Whenever you're here, we're
Are we
great.
gonna meet? Wait a minute, what's the week after that? The 30th?
That is my plan. Yes.
Okay, I'll see you
Okay.
guys and Shabbat Shalom.
All right. Be well, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Shabbat shalom. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.